Welcome, everybody. I'm sorry there's not enough room. Hopefully we can move on in a little bit more. I'm Justin Kitch. I'm the CEO of Curious.com. I'm very excited to be here today with Carol Dweck. Yes. I've had the great privilege of getting to know Carol and her work over the past few weeks. I've gotten to know Carol, and over the past few years, I've really gotten to know her work. And in fact, Curious.com was inspired largely by Carol's work, and I just thought I'd just tell a quick story to tell you why I'm so passionate and excited to hear what she has to say today, which is that I was very fortunate to start a .com company called Homestead.com. They kind of did extremely well and ended up being sold to a company called Intuit. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take a year off, and my wife is a teacher, and she also took a year off while we had our third child. So we had this amazing gift of a year together of I'd been working and running a company since I was in college and never had time off. She'd been teaching. And we just said, what the heck would we do with a year off? It's like the biggest gift ever. What would we do? And we both quickly concluded over a few bottles of wine, mostly consumed by me, that we would learn things. And we would try to go back to that mentality of learning stuff for the sake of learning it. Learning it not because we needed it for a job, not because we felt like we were behind in something, not because we didn't know how to do our taxes or what investment to make, but because we wanted to just learn it for the joy of learning. And my wife had happened to read Mindset right about this time. This was 2010, and actually Carol will tell us that it came out and at first was not that widely received and started to hit the popular culture around 2009, 2010. And that was right when I was exposed to the concepts in there. And my wife, who's an amazing parent and a working mom, was criticizing me for the way I coached our kids. And not that she thought I was a great coach and did positive coaching, but I forgot to remind them enough that it wasn't the outcome that mattered, and it wasn't how good they were, because I thought they were really good. It was that they were working hard, trying hard, and I needed to work on rewarding that. And that's how Mindset came into our lives. And I fell so in love with this concept over the year of learning things that I started Curious. Because Curious to me is this idea of reaching into your pocket, and instead of pulling out Facebook or YouTube every time or playing Candy Crush, what if you could just pull out 5 or 15 minutes of learning something? And that is, to me, what growth mindset represents. So it actually fundamentally changed my life. It fundamentally changed what I ended up doing. I've been now doing that for 3 years, and I probably will be doing it for 15 more years. And as I've been walking around with Carol over the last couple of days and having several different talks with her, people are coming up to her like she is a rock star. And they're coming up to her because they have the same story. I thought I was just this unique guy who had this story, but everyone has this story. Probably everyone in this room is here, and the reason it's completely packed and there's 50 people trying to get in is because you all have been touched so fundamentally by this work. And I would just challenge you, as you're thinking through what Carol's about to say, can you think of another piece of academic research in the last 10 or 20 years that would cause that type of emotional response from people? And that's why I'm so thrilled to introduce Carol Dweck. So, quick background on Carol. She won't tell you all these things herself, but she was born in Brooklyn, New York. She attended a public school. Yeah. I asked her what was that unusual. She goes, well, everybody. I didn't even know there were private schools. Everyone attended a public school. She ended up studying across the East River in Columbia. Is that right? Do I have that right?
No, it's just kind of.
Just.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of across the river. I'm from Wichita. I don't really know. Yeah, she got a PhD in psychology at Yale, and at that point, that's where I'd like to pick up the story, because she already knew at an early age that she had stumbled across something as she was working on her dissertation. So Carol, can you pick up there about how you ended up just stumbling across and upon this amazing research?
Well, speaking of curious, a colleague recently sent me a picture of her 5-month-old nephew who had just turned on a computer for the first time. Now, a few years later, we see the next slide, and the next slide. What happened to that joyous baby? How did that joyous baby turn into all these discouraged children? So that's what I wanted to know. That was the driving force behind my research. What happens? What do kids learn over that period that makes them so vulnerable? And how do we get them back to that Edenic state? Next slide. Next slide. How do we get them back to that joyous learner? So I embarked on this research in graduate school, finding some kids who, at the merest whiff of difficulty, got discouraged and defensive, but other kids who were instead, when I was giving them super hard problems that they were failing at, they were saying things like, I love a challenge, or, you know, I was hoping this would be informative. So those were my role models. And the first thing I found was the first kids thought they were failing, right? And that it reflected terribly on them. But the second kids didn't think they were failing. They thought they were learning. Oh my goodness, there's something powerful there. And over the years, I came to understand through research that there were two mindsets that underlay these very, very different patterns, where kids who had equal ability, equal skills, were looking so different when it came to taking on challenges or sticking to difficult tasks.
So maybe you can just describe and summarize for everybody, just quickly, sort of, you know, what is a fixed mindset that you discovered, and what is the growth mindset that you discovered?
Yes. When kids or adults are in more of a fixed mindset, they feel like their abilities, talents, their intelligence, these are just fixed traits. You were given a certain amount, you have a certain amount, and that's it, carved in stone. This fixed mindset makes you worry about how much do I have? Am I smarter than him or her? Are they smarter than me? And it makes you kind of curate your image, groom yourself, so you're always looking super successful and genius-like, and you never look like you're struggling or feel like you're struggling. But other people tend more toward a growth mindset. They don't think everyone's the same, but they think the core idea is that we can develop our abilities through not just hard work, but learning good strategies and having lots of input and mentoring from others.
Great. And so as you discovered these mindsets and you ended up doing this work, there was actually a pretty big gap of time between that and when you wrote your book.
Yes.
And so maybe tell us, when was it that you realized that you needed to write a book? Why did you write that book? And we're going to get to what happened next after that.
Okay. Research, 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 findings, findings, findings. A lot of things happening, a lot of things learned. One day, my graduate students and postdocs in my lab held a figurative gun to my head, and they said, write the book. They said, we've been helped so much by these ideas and applying them to our lives. We've told our families about these ideas. Our families have been helped. Why would you be doing this if it wasn't to help people understand how they could expand themselves and have lives that they might not have conceived of before?
Great.
I listened.
Yeah, well, you sure did. Okay, so you write the book, and a couple things that are notable.
I wanted to say one more thing. Academics didn't write these kinds of books at that point, just starting. Just starting. And academics certainly did not reveal themselves.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So,
okay.
Okay. Now, so when you say these books, you mean
Popular books.
right? A pop culture book.
Popular.
Which, God forbid, academics write a popular book. I'm like,
I mean, the worst thing you could be called was a popularizer.
my twin brother is a Shakespeare scholar and accuses me of being too successful to be legitimate because too many people know and want to use something that he thinks, yeah. So I understand that. And what I find really amazing, though, is that you revealed in the book that you were a closet fixed mindsetter yourself.
Yes.
And that must have, I mean, was that something that you were planning to do all along? And when you did it, what was that like? Or what did it feel like?
Amazingly, it was years into the research before I realized it was about me. And in psychology, we have this term, you know, there's research and there's me-search. and I was doing research.
Which all the best, I believe, is research, right?
Well,
in
yeah, because you
psychology.
have this kind of burning desire to figure it out.
Right. Okay, so you reveal that you're a fixed mindsetter. You reveal that you're fighting these temptations. And how much of that do you think was why you were able to discover this new growth mindset?
I think that's a key to why I could discover it, because there were always two parts of me. Part of me loved adventure and learning and, had this confidence that I could conquer all. But then part of me was this smart person who wanted to look smart and didn't want to take on the challenge I might not be good at, didn't want to pursue something that wasn't going well. It made me anxious. So these things were at war. And that fixed mindset part of me was really solidified in 6th grade when my 6th grade teacher seated us around the room in IQ order.
Ugh.
Now, unfortunately for me, I had the first seat in the first row. And I say unfortunate because then I felt like I had to be perfect from then on. And so this is the image. This is what makes you special. You're smarter than the other kids. And that really heightened the duality between wanting to be this totally smart person and wanting to be this adventurous learner. So those two things at play in me really played into the research.
So you actually describing exactly what the research was that you ended up talking about in the book, which is that if you told kids beforehand that they were super smart and they were the ones that could do this and had all the ability, that they ran into brick walls and failed and gave up. But if you told them instead that they should just try hard and have the growth mindset, then they actually blew through the wall.
Tie that effort to why they were doing well, or tie the strategy they used to why they were doing well. They weren't fazed by difficulty.
Right. Oh, you hear that story and you think, why the heck are we even measuring IQ? Why are we even why are we still in a society that would measure something like that, which is supposedly fixed in kindergarten, and then kind of does real damage?
So it turns out that Alfred Binet, who invented the IQ test, had a radical growth mindset. So why'd he make up the test? The Paris Public Schools asked him to create a test that could tell them who are the kids who weren't on track, who weren't succeeding within that curriculum, so he could make programs for them. That was what his career was, making programs that unlocked learning in children. He was apoplectic when Americans and British started using the test to say that we were measuring intelligence. And not only that, fixed intelligence, but he couldn't stop us. And by the way, many of the worst culprits were at my university, Stanford. Mm-hmm. And my life's mission, and your life's mission, is to undo that mischief.
It's actually called this. It's called the Stanford Binet test. Yeah. And we talk at Curious about a curious quotient and getting rid of IQ and measuring curiosity instead. I'm wondering if that resonates, or is that what you're talking about? Like you should be rewarding this curiosity.
And by the way, IQ is not fixed. There are kids who make tremendous gains. So leave it to itself, it stays pretty stable, but there are kids who make tremendous gains. So the question was curiosity quotient.
Yes, just in general, like, should we be trying to start a movement around something to replace IQ, something that actually does measure that growth mindset?
Why do we need a measure of curiosity? So then some kids are high curious and others are low curious?
Yeah, and talk about assessment. And I mean, how would you assess?
Talk about promoting it rather than measuring it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a fantastic point, which is, and largely in this conversation, we're going to try to talk more about classrooms and children, but of course the growth mindset applies just as much to individuals and to corporations.
Yeah. So for example, people try to replace what's the child's ability with find your passion, right?
Yeah.
And now kids are freaked out. They're 8 years old and they don't have a passion. And also, we are finding in our research that a lot of students are feeling that this passion is this fixed inborn thing, And it's preventing them, if they think, oh, maybe this is my passion, then they're not interested in anything else.
So
they're not the people who are going to integrate. And
so they have a fixed mindset about the growth mindset.
about the passion, about the passion.
Right, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the book comes out. Let's pick up the story again. The book comes out, and is it a smash hit on day one?
No, because it was testing my new growth mindset.
Right. So tell about that.
So it came out, and a number of very interesting people were highly influenced by it, but you wouldn't say it was really taking off. It took a couple of years, maybe after a year, the word of mouth spread, blogs started being blogged, articles started being written, TV shows started getting interested, and it grew from there, and it's still growing. But in the first year or two, it's like, I put my all into it. What's happening?
So you had the fixed mindset.
Well,
coming back.
It sort of was knocking at the door, but
now might be a good time to introduce the audience to Dwayne.
Yes.
Okay, let's introduce him to Dwayne. So, well, I think it's better out of your own mouth. But part of the research that I love is that you say that you can be a fixed mindset in some things and growth mindset in the other. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I felt fixed about was guitar playing, and when I took that year off, I decided I'm going to be good enough to play and perform the guitar. But I felt very growth mindset-y about other mm-hmm. things, and that was reassuring to me, as I'm sure to other people. But you talk about Dwayne as actually this constant fixed mindset voice that just, and you have to give it your own name, but that sits in your head and is constantly telling you that.
So when I wrote mindset, the language was more about having a mindset or the other in one area, or moving from a fixed to a growth mindset. But we've realized over the years, we all have both. We're all a mixture of both, even within a given area. And there are things that trigger a fixed mindset. So the first thing you need to acknowledge that we're all a mixture. And when you hear someone say, oh, I've always had a growth mindset, I have a total growth mindset, I never have it, wrong. It's a sign of a fixed mindset. Okay, so then find your fixed mindset triggers. How do you feel when someone's company you started your company at the same time and someone's is taking off and yours isn't? How do you feel when you're struggling and not making progress? Does that voice in your head, that fixed mindset persona, start saying things? He has it, she has it, you don't. Your father said this wasn't going to work. What is that fixed mindset persona saying? How's it making you feel? What is it making you act like? So acknowledge you're a mixture. Start understanding your trigger points. What does your fixed mindset persona say when it's triggered? And then give it a name. My colleague in Australia, Susan Mackey, was working with banking executives, and she had them give their fixed mindset persona a name. And here's this buttoned-up suit, this business executive, the boss of this whole unit, saying, you know, when we're in a crunch and there's a deadline looming in and I'm not sure we can make it, Dwayne shows up. Dwayne makes me mean, nasty, critical, carping. I undermine my staff. I get irritated with them. I take the work back and do it myself. Then we make the deadline, but they feel completely demoralized and I'm totally annoyed with them. And then the team started piping up. One woman said, yes, and when your Dwayne shows up, my Yanni comes roaring out. And Yanni was this macho man who lived lived within, and came out to criticize her. And she said, and when Yanni comes roaring forth, I cower to Dwayne and I grovel, and Dwayne hates it. And so the boss says, yeah, Dwayne hates that. And so they began to understand how this vicious cycle developed. Now that group went from having some of the lowest morale in the entire very large bank to being in the top quarter in terms of climate and morale, because they could work out their relationships. Like they could rectify. They could say, is that Dwayne? Yes, that's Dwayne. That's not me. And the beauty of naming your fixed mindset persona is it's sort of you, but it's not you. So give it a name and then start working with it. Don't banish it. Don't say go away. It's there. It feels like it's helping you, even though in many ways it can be undermining. But you say, okay, Dwayne, or whatever, Aunt Henrietta or Uncle Ebenezer, thank you for your input. But I'd really like to try this, and I hope you can get on board with me as I try it. So then you try it, and it's a miserable failure, and Dwayne comes roaring back and says, look, I'm laughing at you, and if I'm laughing at you, everyone's laughing at you. And you say, no, Dwayne, you're right. I did have a failure, but I think I learned a number of things from that, and I think I know what I want to try next. Can you bear with me as we do that? And so it's the idea of educating your fixed mindset persona, bringing it on board with you with your growth mindset goals.
That's fantastic. And to me, that really resonates, because I still, I think, I've done nice things so far in my life, I still hear that voice all the time in my own head of like, oh yeah, you have this new company, what is it doing as well as someone else's new company? Should you even done that? Or are you doing this right with your kids? Mm-hmm. And so it's so nice to not think that it's this binary thing that you have to live up to always.
And
always
also, I think if we say, oh, I'm in a growth mindset, you don't look for that and you just slip back. And you don't embody it toward your students or your kids or your employees.
Right. So I want to get to the classroom, but before we do that, let's finish the rest of the story, which is that the book does become smash hit, as evidenced by this room and evidenced by you being treated like a rock star everywhere I've been with you so far in the last few days. And so you start to notice something, though, that besides having many success stories, there's also some misapplications. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So growth mindset has been used in the most spectacular ways by educators, by business leaders, and hugely gratifying, and also showing that all kids have such enormous potential to thrive and grow. And kids from Native American reservation who were always at the bottom of their district went to the top. Kids in Harlem or the South Bronx went to the top when growth mindset principles were deeply and effectively applied. So that was such a joy. But then this colleague of mine, Susan Mackey, who's an incredibly skilled practitioner, said, I'm seeing a lot of false growth mindset. I found that irritating. I said, what are you talking about? In my New York way. What are you talking about? It's a simple concept. It's the belief that you and others can grow their abilities. What can you get wrong about that? And also, why would people want to have a false growth mindset if they could have a true growth mindset? So I kind of argued, but my eyes were opened and I started seeing it everywhere. People were misconstruing the concept. For example, people would take whatever they loved about themselves and call it a growth mindset. So, you'd hear people say, oh yeah, I have an open mindset. I'm happy for you, but it's not a growth mindset. And if you drift from the core meaning, you drift from the potential benefits. Many educators were equating it with effort or exhorting kids to try hard. And learning is about not just brute force, but good strategies and knowing when you need mentoring and input. And maybe one of the worst things was that educators were starting to use effort as a consolation prize. So if the child wasn't learning, at least you could praise their effort. No. That was the self-esteem movement. That's not growth mindset. Growth mindset was formed, developed to help kids learn, for us to close achievement gaps, not make kids feel good while they're not learning. So the job is to get those kids learning and joyously learning, to find ways to unlock the curiosity, unlock the strategies, have them asking for the input and not trying to make them feel good about not learning. And they don't buy that either. They know that's the consolation prize, and they know that means they're not smart.
Absolutely, and I see it in youth sports too. You can tell the kid, great try, but if he's striking out every time, and you keep saying, you're doing great, you lose all credibility.
All credibility.
Because they're like, I'm not doing great, I'm striking out every time. And so you have to combine it with actual some kind of solution.
Yes, and the solution we're finding in our research, in a classroom or on a playing field, is that you sit with the child and you say, let's figure out how you're thinking about this. I want to understand what you tried, let's see what happened, and then we'll talk together about what you should try next. And so what we're devoted to now is finding these ways of promoting a growth mindset through actions, because it turns out this is the most shocking thing we've found in our research in the last year or two. Many, many, many teachers, many, many, many parents are not passing on their growth mindset. And the correlation between a parent's mindset and the children's, the correlation between a teacher's mindset and the students is unbelievably low. So what's going on? We were really kind of floored by this, because yeah, maybe the praise, don't praise the intelligence, counterintuitive. So maybe a growth mindset parent didn't know that. But it turns out there are a lot of behaviors that convey the mindsets, and they may not be intuitive. So the child doesn't see the mindset that sits in your head. The child sees your behavior and hears your words. So the praise, praising the process and tying it to progress and learning. How you react to a child's failures. And we're finding that parents who get nervous, anxious when their child stumbles or struggles, they're conveying that to the child. Child's moving toward a fixed mindset, even if the parent has a growth mindset. Or if the parent gives kind of a false reassurance with an underlay of anxiety, oh, that's okay. And the child moves towards a fixed mindset. And so it's when the parent or teacher says, whoa, here's an opportunity. Where do you think we should go next? What do you think we should do to get this learning back on track?
So maybe you can give an example also on the parenting side of that, as the right way or a way that we should try to do that, as opposed to, because you're right, all the time you're saying things that it's going to be fine, it's going to be just fine, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, we got a serious problem here.
And they know it. Yeah, what if my child isn't a great student?
Right.
What if my child doesn't go to that university? They hear it in your voice. And
so how do we avoid that?
Yeah, and you've got to say, hey, this happened. Where do we go from here? So are you disappointed in this grade? Not I'm disappointed, but what happened? What didn't go right? How did you study? You know, just these kind of, and let it come from the child as much as possible, and not sort of a grilling, like what happened, but more of an inquiry, because it's all about how to further your learning. That's what you care about, the child's learning. And if your child enjoys learning and engages in deep learning, everything will follow: the grades, the test scores, the good university. So the anxiety over this little thing is making it much worse.
So you say the research doesn't show that there's really a genetic transfer going on, or even a process transfer going on between parent and child, but I'm curious about a couple things. One is there a possible transfer from sibling to sibling of mindset, and is there also a birth order explanation or something that factors in?
Yeah, there is some relationship to birth order, because so the firstborns often have more of a fixed mindset. The parents are anxious. This is our first progeny. It reflects us. Maybe we're not good parents. Are we good parents? If the child's a genius, it means we're good parents. And they're anxious. They have a standard, and they're worried if the child isn't meeting it. The next ones come along, que sera, sera, right? And, so you just want them to be happy, those next
So
ones.
instead, your attitude needs to be, for your first child, you're like, not bad for a first try. And then you have another, like, it's getting a little better. So you need to have the growth mindset yourself. Yeah, right. And then what about sibling to sibling? I mean, is it possible? I see this with my kids. I have 3 children, and they're 12, 10, and 5. And I missed the 10th birthday yesterday, so I'm feeling really bad about that. So let's talk about the 10-year-old, because he has the middle one. He seems to have this incredible growth mindset, but he models off of his brother, who's the older one, what I see much more fear of doing things or being right all the time, and I totally see what you're saying. Is it possible that either the middle one can kind of help the older one, or can the older one help the middle one?
Either way.
And how do we, and can the classroom be the same way? It must be happening all the time. In the classroom, when there's one teacher and 20, 30 kids.
I think it's the peer. Well, I think everyone knows the peer group can be very powerful. And one of the reasons that some of our growth mindset programs work so well is, especially if you let it arise from the students and guide them, but let them research it and talk about it, is they embrace it as a peer group. They write rap songs, they put on skits. I've received films of these amazing products. Whereas, are they going to band together and write rap songs about the standardized test? No. So that peer group can be very powerful. And in fact, in our growth mindset programs, we interview older peers who give advice to younger kids about how growth mindset helped them. It's not that you're just spouting it from on high.
Right, so they need to see examples of it. Like you say, they know the truth. Mm-hmm. And so if they see examples of other kids being successful and being rewarded for having that willingness to fail and try hard, then they're going to actually be taught the right way we think about it. So we have many, many educators here. I know I'm not myself an educator, so I'm a little bit out of my depth, but I want to make sure you get a chance to answer or talk a little bit about, like, if you're an educator who's trying to implement the growth mindset and has read the book and maybe he's even been doing it for a while, and now you're saying, well, watch out for the false growth mindset. What are a few, 3 tips that you should make sure if I was starting a classroom tomorrow, haven't really taught before, I love kids, I've coached, my wife's a teacher, what would you tell me are 3 things that I should make sure I do from day one in my classroom?
Well, day one, take your own journey to a growth mindset so that you're open to learning. You're open to learning from the kids. You're open to showing your mistakes to the kids. You're not threatened by a child who isn't learning. And I tell teachers to think or say, every child has something to teach me. So if you figure out how to unlock learning in difficult cases, whoa, have you learned a lot. So that's number one. Then number two, embody that belief that every child can develop his or her abilities, and that you have no idea what's locked up in each child. So I learned recently of a teacher who was actually, an elementary school teacher, who was actually having kids talk about name their fixed mindset persona, draw pictures of their fixed mindset personas, and kind of talk about them to the class. And one boy wouldn't do it. They worked weeks on this, and he wouldn't do it. Most teachers would feel threatened, would get punitive, might punish him in some way. But this teacher just said, look, when you're ready, the door is open. And one day out of nowhere, she heard this little voice say, "Dumping Dan." Who said that? So she goes over and, what did you say? Dumping Dan. Everybody dumps on me all the time. Everybody yells at me. I can't do anything right. I always do everything wrong. So she said, well, let's talk to Dumping Dan. Let's see why he feels that way, and let's see if he can, get on board with your learning. Well, as she worked with him, that boy opened up. He had been by far the worst student in the class, and now he was learning by leaps and bounds. You don't know what is locked up within each child. Often when kids look bored or oppositional, they are hurting and they are scared. And it's our job to figure out how to get that person out there again.
Wow, that's fantastic. It makes me want to go be a teacher right now. But okay, so let's talk about lifelong learning, because many people who are inspired by your work, including myself, are not teachers, and they're looking for their own personal journey, or in my case, trying to actually give that experience to other people through building products and apps and technology. So what is it that we can do, everyone in this room, as individuals? If you're saying that we have fixed and growth mindset, we're battling against each other all the time, what are the things that we can be doing to make sure that we're continuing to be lifelong learners and pursuing a growth mindset instead of kind of falling back into that trap?
Yes. So in addition to the steps I talked about before, I give this assignment. I teach a freshman seminar at Stanford every fall. 16 wonderful, eager freshmen terrified. Stanford has this very low acceptance rate. In fact, there was a parody in the New York Times that said, Stanford is so elite, it's not accepting any students to get its acceptance rates. Like, right. So here they are, they're great, but they're thinking, oh, everyone's a genius except me. So, take them through the mindset. And then for one weekly assignment, I say, do something outrageously growth mindset in the service of something you really care about and want to change about yourself. Outrageous. And they do amazing things. So one young man last year was painfully shy. Stanford's about networking and joining this club and that club, and he was sitting in his dorm room by himself, painfully shy. For the assignment, he decided to run for president of his dorm. So the night comes where the candidates are giving speeches, and he's standing in line, and he's thinking, I can still go sit down and not give the speech, but then what will I write for my paper? So he gets up, he gives the speech, and he won. He became the center of social life in his dorm. Then he tried out for the school play. Then he joined the salsa dancers, Los Salsieros de Stanford. And his life opened up, and there are so many examples. For some people, outrageous just means opening up to someone's criticism or taking a course. So what would be outrageous for you? And do it and send me the paper.
That's fantastic. Okay, so you all have a homework assignment from Carol herself. So I know that corporations and organizations have tried to implement the mindset. You told me a funny story about a CEO who contacted you and said, we've assembled all the top growth mindset individuals in the company in a room. We'd like you to come talk to them. Which is like a Fireside cartoon or something. But there must be successful ways to do this. There must be successful ways where large organizations can actually implement the growth mindset without turning it into a jingo that doesn't work or that becomes parodied. And
so first let me tell you about our research, because we did research now. We've done research now with Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies because we were fascinated by the question of whether an organization could embody a mindset, whether a mindset could permeate an organization. So in these companies, we asked employees what their company believed and valued. Did their company believe in fixed talent and sort of worship it? We call that a culture of genius. Or did their company believe in and value the development of everyone in the company? Interestingly, there was a tremendous consensus within each company about whether it was a fixed or a growth mindset company, a culture of genius or a culture of development. And we also found it made a profound difference. The people in growth mindset companies said they felt far more committed to the company, empowered by the company. They said the company was much more innovative, creative. If they took a wise risk but it didn't work out, the company had their back. The people in fixed mindset companies said no. First of all, they had one foot out the door waiting for a better offer. They also said when someone's risk goes bad, someone gets the axe. Yeah. Exactly. The one thing they said there was more of was unethical behavior. Because if the name of the game is be the genius, be the superstar, there isn't the teamwork. There is the hiding information from others, hoarding the secrets, and there is the cutting corners to get ahead. But my favorite finding was this: the managers. The managers in the growth mindset company said there was far more potential among the employees to rise within the company and be the next stars. But here's why I think it's ironic. In the fixed mindset companies, they hired the talent, they groomed the talent, they rewarded the talent, they retained the talent. Now they're going, where's the talent? So people weren't thriving in that company, and they weren't seeing that they had.
Right. Now, if let's say that you do these surveys in your organization and you're like, oh no, we're a fixed mindset organization, and I'd imagine some of that is at the top and you wouldn't have self-awareness enough to do that, but let's say that you did have self-awareness enough to realize that there was a problem. Could you change it?
Yes, and I worked with a company, a very large financial company, who had a new CEO with a really extreme growth mindset. He made everybody feel valuable. When you walked into that building, you know, a guy who signs you in, he showed me my book, and the elevator operator showed me the book, and they were included in them. They had sign-up sheets in the lobby for interdisciplinary projects, because they wanted people from all different departments within the company to exchange skills and so forth. The security guards were signing up for the projects. Yeah. That's how empowered, committed, and valued everyone felt.
Wow. So could you take this to the extreme? I mean, do you think that a country could have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? And when you're looking at what's happening, today's the primary in New York, like, do you look at that as I do and say, this is a battle of mindsets? And
in part, it's a battle of mindsets. I don't say mindset is everything or the panacea or the root of all virtue or evil, but in part it's a mindset. And I feel sad that many of the candidates are provoking fears and playing to the basest motives of people, trying to make them feel superior to other people, to paint other groups as inferior or dangerous. That's fixed mindset thinking that creates stereotyping and prejudice. Right. It's not, we're an inclusive country, we're a place that cares about people, helps them grow, and it kind of feeds the vigor of the nation.
So you could basically say that for our country, Donald Trump is Dwayne. I mean,
oh, let me.
Sorry, that was me, not Carol speaking. To be very clear. So, would you care to comment on that?
I would not.
Okay. So,
I want to get back to
yeah. Okay. So, what I'd love to do is have you wrap up with talking about the current research that you're doing and some amazing story you told me this morning.
Yeah. So some of our research has shown that showing kids how joyous it is to do hard things is really important. And that often when kids are doing hard things, they feel dumb. But in a growth mindset, they understand that when they're doing hard things, they're growing these connections in their brains and getting smarter. And recently, I had kindergartners visit me in my office. 18 of them swarmed in, and they were studying mindsets, 5-year-olds. And we had these great conversations. One of them said, you know how you learn 1 + 1 and you want to keep doing 1 + 1? No, 1 + 2. And then another one said, what do you say to yourself when something is really hard? So we discussed it at length. They were fabulous. And then last week, I received a booklet from their teacher. She had them do a meditation exercise where they imagine themselves going through a maze, and suddenly it became very, very difficult. And they said to themselves, one of the things we discussed in our session, I want to do this because it's hard. So if I could have the last 2 slides. They drew pictures. Keep going. Okay, that's one. And the next one? Yes. They drew these pictures that illustrated how they felt when they came to this wall in the maze and they said, I want to do this because it's hard. And then they dictated to the teacher. And here are just 3 examples of what they said. When I faced the challenge, I said, I'd like to do this because it's hard. And my brain felt like this picture, courageous. Courageous means that it's hard, but you still want to do it. and you want to do it because it's hard. Another one, I said, I want to do this, and it differenced me, because then all of the angriness flew out, and the happiness flowed into my brain, and I completed the maze. And the final one, when I told myself, I want to do this because it's hard, this sparkle appeared. They put sparkles on. I felt happy. The wall opened up, and I walked through. But then I just came to a dead end. It wasn't really a dead end. It was another wall you can go through.
Carol, thank you so much for being here on behalf of the conference, ASU GSV. Thank you. It's been a real privilege to be up here with you. Let's give a big round of applause for Carol.